Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We have hit week 3 of the football season. 2 games in the books, 1 game in the book if you're the Gunner Tigers. We are entering week 3, and we are coming off one of the craziest, wildest weeks that we've had in a while. A lot of down-to-the-wire comebacks, shootouts, close games all over the place. If you had a dog in the hunt this week, odds are you were at the edge of your seat because so many of these games were in the balance until the end, and a lot of them went the way of our local teams, so that's always a good thing. So we'll recap all that, and then we look ahead to what's going to happen here in week 3. We do have a district game to talk about. We do have some people that are finishing up non-district play this week, and they start district play next week. So there is a lot of action to talk about, especially this last week, week 2. Crazy games all over the place. We'll start over at Bearcat Stadium, where Sherman picked up a 34-30 victory over Princeton, bouncing back from their loss in the Battle of the Axe. Jumping to a big lead with 3 touchdowns in 5 minutes span in the first quarter. It's 21-3. Things are looking really good. They're up 24-9 at halftime. And Princeton goes into the locker room, regroups, comes out in the third quarter, puts together a long drive, then gets another touchdown, and all of a sudden we have a game that's going to come down to the wire. And I'm sure there were some people that were worried, oh my God, here we go again. The Bearcats have a lead going to the fourth quarter, and it's not going to last. But twice Princeton gets within a point, but Sherman is able to hang on and win this game 34-30. Princeton did have the ball at the end with a chance to go score, but Sherman got the stop. I don't know why Princeton didn't go for 2-point conversions after their last 2 touchdowns when they had a chance to tie the game, and of course that would have made at the end, they could have kicked a field goal to force overtime instead of potentially having to go and score a touchdown to win the game because a field goal would have been meaningless. But either way, it was a good bounce back for Sherman, and a big reason for that is that they'll be starting district play this week. Some of the offensive standouts in this win over Princeton, Phoenix Grant completed 8 of 13 passes for 190 yards. Hit on some big plays. One of those early on, a 62-yard touchdown pass to Vontae Sanders. He also hooked up with Vontrell Sanders twice. He had 7 catches for 129 yards. One of those was a 75-yard touchdown pass. Dane Castleberry kicked 2 field goals, including a 41-yarder right before halftime. And then he had one with 4 minutes left that made it the 4-point game. That one was from 29 yards. So 2 big kicks there that essentially proved to be the difference. And Grant added a touchdown run to his night as well. He had 10 carries for 57 yards. Caleb Thompson did not find the end zone this week, but he did have 19 carries for 106 yards to lead the Bearcats. So that's a huge momentum builder going into a Frisco ISD plus Sherman District, and they are going to host Frisco Centennial to kick that off at 7 o'clock on Friday at Bearcat Stadium. This is District 6-5A, Division 1. Sherman comes in at 1-1. Frisco Centennial comes in at 1-1. They lost last week to Lake Dallas, 29-23, after they had opened with a victory. So they had a chance to win their game last week, came up short in a close game. So they're licking their wounds a little bit, but obviously everybody's in a clean slate because it's district play. Everybody's back to 0-0. And that's one thing that Coach Kane has talked about, facing a team in Centennial that they haven't seen a lot of lately. The last time they played was way back in 2009. And even though Frisco Centennial is coming off just a 2-win season, a 1-win season last year, he's already talked about not overlooking them because of that record, because of coming off a loss, that everybody is on the even footing. And Sherman has a chance, to start off district play in a good spot. They have Frisco Centennial this week. Next week they go on the road on a Thursday to play Lebanon Trail, who lost to Princeton last week. We talked about that in the preview. And if you can beat Princeton, then you would think you could beat Lebanon Trail. So there's a pretty decent chance if Sherman takes care of business at home on Friday, they could be 2-0 going into their bye week, and bank those 2 wins. Kind of see what else is going on in the district, who's beating who. Obviously the favorites in that district are Lone Star, Wakeland, Frisco Reedy is a playoff contender. We'll talk about them in a minute because they played Denison this last week. But there's there's an opportunity there for Sherman to really get some momentum. And you talk about, you could go into your bye week on a 3-game winning streak. You feel really, you let the game obviously against Denison slip away from your perspective. You're up 21-6 going in the fourth quarter. You could easily be saying, hey, we're 4-0. But 3-1 would be a great place. And like I said, you'd be 2-0 in district. And you'd be able to see already at that point, some teams would have 3 games under their belt to kind of figure out, okay, what does our matchup mean against some of these people? Are they must wins? Are they where are they in the race? And that starts against Centennial on Friday night. So that's going to be that's obviously the key one to watch because it is a district game. Everybody else that's playing this week is still in the non-district portion of their schedule. That district is just so big. There's 9 teams and you're playing 8 district games. And so it's going to be interesting to see what Sherman can do, especially like I said with the short week next week. If they can build this momentum going into their bye week, which cuts their season essentially in half. Some people in that district are going to have the last week of the season off or their second to last week of the season off. It's not exactly in the middle, but it's close enough in the middle that it's like a traditional play 5 games, get your bye week, and then have 5 games down the stretch to make the playoffs. So that's going to be interesting. I think, like I said, you saw some good things from Sherman against Princeton. Obviously, they got out to the fast start. They've showed for the second week in a row, hey, big plays in the passing game. The second game in a row that Vontrell Sanders has had a long touchdown. He had the 68-yarder against Denison and then the 75-yarder this week. There are some explosive pieces in this passing game. They've shown that in 2 weeks. They've got athletes that if you get them in space and you get them the ball, they can make things happen. They can outrun people to the end zone. And I think that's, if you're any of these teams coming up, you've got to find a way. You've got to kind of pick and choose who you kind of want to mess with to try to slow them down. And so going to be interesting to see what happens when Sherman hosts Centennial. 7 o'clock start in District 6-5A Division I action at Bearcat Stadium on Friday night. So now we'll get into all the non-district games. We'll go next to Denison. They are going to be hosting Kennedale. Both teams are 1-1. Kennedale won last week, 27-12 against Alvarado, and Denison is coming off that loss, that Thursday night loss against Frisco Reedy, 41-7. So if you want to play transitive property, stuff there. If Denison beat Sherman by a touchdown, and then Frisco Reedy beat Denison 41-7, what does that mean in the long term for Sherman? But that's down the road. They won't have, they might be 2 different teams by the time they face each other deep in district play. But Denison went and played on Thursday. It did not go well. Initially, Reedy gets up 13-0 right away, the first 5 minutes. A lot of speed, getting to the outside, long runs, taking advantage of some situations on third down, converting those into those long touchdowns. And then it stayed that way. It was almost like, Denison got punched in the mouth, and they were able to kind of get back up and hold the fort. And it was 13-0 at halftime, and they had to make a goal line stand. They came up with the turnover. Roman Henderson fell on a fumble. So that was huge. That could have been at least 3 points. Probably was going to be 7 because it was at the 1-yard line. Reedy botched a field goal about a bad snap. Denison also had they missed their chance to get points and make it 13-3 at halftime with a blocked field goal. So it kind of steadied. Both teams were kind of really struggling, and then Denison scores to open up the third quarter, and it's 13-7, and you're like, okay, well maybe this is a repeat of the Battle of the Axe. It's going to be a gritty, hang around, comeback victory in the fourth quarter, and that did not happen as Reedy pulled away again with some big passes, some big plays. They were up 20-7 going to the fourth quarter, and then they scored 3 times in the fourth quarter to really break it open. And a lot of that was Denison's offense struggling. They really couldn't run the ball. I mean, that's pretty much the story of it. Is they ran 30 times and they only gained 36 yards, and that is not really sack aided in terms of why the running totals were low. They only had 180 yards of offense. Reedy put up over 550. Turnovers were not a big thing. They both had a turnover, and the one that Denison had didn't hurt them because that was the botched field goal that they missed points on. So Denison actually came out ahead, sort of in the turnovers, hurting them or not hurting them. And it was just a slog of a game. It was not, if Denison wants to run the ball, that's what they do for the most part. Establish a ground game and then work off of that, and they just could not get anything going. It was they hit a couple long passes to a wide open Aaron Schaefer. The tight end had 2 catches for 78 yards. Kyson Lucane had 7 catches for 49 yards. But outside of that, like I said, I mean, running the ball, when your quarterback is your leading rusher and he has 12 carries for 24 yards, your running back has 11 carries for 19 yards. It's tough sledding, and Reedy has a big defensive line. They are tough to move, and it did not go well for them. And like I said, for 3 quarters, you could say Denison played okay defensively. They gave up the 3 big plays, and I know everybody says that happened. You can't take that away. But if you took out those 3 touchdowns through 3 quarters, that was like 80% of Reedy's yardage was those 3 plays. They did a good job of getting them into 3rd and long situations, but the problem was on those 3rd and long situations that was where the problem was. They weren't able to get those stops, and they turned those 3rd down plays into touchdowns. So Dennis is looking to bounce back this week. It's another good opponent. I think we mentioned it before the Sherman game and last week. It's a really tough non-district schedule from the point of you're playing the Battle of the Axe right off the bat. That's always a hyped up game and everything. You play a Frisco Reedy team, that is expected to make the playoffs, be one of the top 3 teams probably in that district, in that Sherman district. And now you're facing a Kennedale team. They always make the playoffs. This is a program, I think it's been 20 something years, a little more than 20 years since they didn't make the playoffs. So they're always good. Luckily it's a home game. But this is going to be another interesting test going into district play next week. So this is where, if you're Denison, you really want to bounce back, get some positive momentum. Doesn't have to be a win. Obviously wins are great. But if they can improve on both sides of the ball, going into the games that count next week, then I think you at least feel a little bit better about your standing. There are a lot of people, for whatever predictions and prognostications that you want to take, with a grain of salt. Denison is viewed as either a playoff team or a borderline playoff team. Some people had them pick 3rd, some people had them pick 4th, some people had them picked 5th, and just miss the playoffs. So I don't know how much of that has changed based on who they've played, but I do know that you want that confidence. You want to be able to look at film after this game against Kennedale and say, you know what, we were better. We took the lessons that we needed to learn from this game against Reedy and turned it into something. So very interesting to see what happens on Friday at Munson Stadium when Denison hosts Kennedale to close out non-district play and kick off district play next week. As always, we talked about this from week 1. Every week it seems like we have a couple of all area matchups, and we do have one that is probably the number 1 matchup. Battle of the Boroughs back on the schedule. Hasn't been played since 2017, if you can believe that. So that's obviously a rivalry that everybody's looking for. Everybody's really excited when they saw this game on the schedule. And not only that, but you have a 2-0 Whitesboro team going to visit a 2-0 Pottsboro team on Friday night. Whitesboro coming off a rally against Bells to win 31-27, and then Pottsboro won their game 55-36 against Callisburg. So Pottsboro's been putting up some big numbers, and Whitesboro, after pulling away in the second half against Crum, they had to rally in this game against Bells, and we'll talk about that one first because obviously that was that was the more exciting of the two games. So that was a game we talked about last week, Whitesboro Bells. It went to overtime the year before. The year before that, they played a very low-scoring game, but it was a couple touchdown difference. Two quality teams, two playoff teams, year in and year out that are willing to battle each other and play great games. And this was another one of them. Bells is up 21-10 at halftime. Whitesboro fights back. They get a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter, so now they're in the lead, 23-21, and then it stays that way for almost the whole fourth quarter, and then Bell scores with a minute and a half left, and then Whitesboro in the final minute, 26 seconds left, Mac Harper with a 4-yard touchdown run ends up being the difference in a 31-27 game. In addition to having the game-winning touchdown, where he had 12 carries for 68 yards. Harper was also 20 of 25 passing, 218 yards, and a couple of touchdowns, both of them to Brett Donaldson. He finished with 8 catches for 91 yards and the 2 touchdowns. Then you throw in Clay Hermes, who had 4 catches for 68 yards. He also had a 2-point conversion on the last touchdown that made it a 4-point game, which is an interesting call, and I haven't had a chance to check in on that, but that is one of those deals where Whitesboro gets that touchdown and they have a chance to they're going to take the lead no matter what, and they went for 2 to make it a 4-point game and to force Bells to go the length of the field and score a touchdown. And I don't know if that's the strategy of playing a slot T team that they're not really good at passing to try to set up a field goal. But if Whitesboro doesn't get that 2-point conversion, they could lose on a field goal instead of just kicking the extra point and being up 3. So that's a gutsy call there at the end to make that happen. Max Parker chipped in a touchdown with a 1-yard run. He plays baseball, so I'm sure he'll hit a home run or 2 when baseball season comes around. He had 12 carries for 49 yards. Pretty good job defensively. You hold Bells to 1 touchdown in the second half, and it came with a minute and a half left. So they almost went the final 3 quarters. The final almost the whole second half without a touchdown. Bells only had 255 yards rushing. We'll go more in depth on their stats when we talk about their game this week. But they only threw 1 pass and it was incomplete. So you didn't give up the big play. Coach Fagan said was talking about how you've got to be careful because they pass very rarely, but when they do, it usually ends up in a big play. And we saw that in Bells' first game because there was a 51-yard touchdown pass, and that was the only completion of the game. So another great game between these two. Obviously, I would assume next year's going to be the same thing. And this week against Pottsboro should be a great game as well. Pottsboro coming off their win, like we said, 55-36. And this was Pottsboro. It got a little nervous towards the end, just in that they were up big, and then Callisburg tried to put together a little bit of a rally. It was 28-0 Pottsboro after the first quarter, and you think that they would I would say they cruised from there, but Callisburg scored twice, got 16 points in the fourth quarter, to make it the 55-36 final. So it looks a little bit better than how the game went. But it was the Major McBride and Halen Flanagan show. They scored all of the touchdowns for the Cardinals. McBride had 15 carries for 170 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also had 4 catches for 75 yards and a touchdown. And then Flanagan had 11 carries for 101 yards and 3 touchdown runs. So it was basically sort of back and forth a little bit with them getting the job done there. Again, another big night offensively. As a team, over 500, almost 550 yards for the Cardinals, 311 rushing and 226 passing. Flanagan was 14 of 20, did have an interception, but also had the touchdown. Brady Fulton, 3 catches for 73 yards to chip in as well. And so Pottsboro's off to 2-0 start. They had to hold on against Van Alstyne, scoring 39 points, put up 55 points this week. And so I think this is the game. Can they do it against a Whitesboro team that's been pretty good defensively? I think that's going to be interesting, and obviously somebody's going to be 3-0. Somebody's gonna not feel good about this, but I think this is a matchup everybody wants to see. It was on the schedule for so many years. Obviously, they were in a district game. They were in a district for so long, and then it kind of petered out as the rivalry. These last 5 years. This was an interesting note that I thought that when I was looking it up. So if Whitesboro does win this game, they'll be 3-0. It's the first time since 2007. So that's an interesting note. That's something that they're playing for. And I think, we talked before the season, I think a lot of people, despite the fact that Whitesboro went as far as they did, getting to the region final and losing to Brock, that they've kind of been overlooked, not just in the state, but also just in their region when people are talking about, hey, these are the teams that we need to worry about in that region. Obviously, Brock is going to be number one, but they're talking about Shallow Water, and that's a team that Whitesboro beat in the playoffs last year and didn't beat close at all. So I think there is a little bit of I think these sort of games give Whitesboro that cachet to say, oh, okay, well, we just played a 4A team in Crum and beat them pretty good, and we played a 3A team that went to the region semifinals and were able to beat them, and now we're playing a 2-0 Pottsboro team that's probably going to make the playoffs in their district. So, over in Region 2. So I do think there is a little. It's not a big part of it, but I think there is a part of Whitesboro wanting to show that last year was definitely not a fluke, and they have so many of the guys back that are contributing to that again. To make this game, like I said, this is the number one game this week. Everyone's going to have their eyes on this one for sure because of the rivalry, and you have 2-0 versus 2-0, and this should be, I think, a great game as well, and we'll see what happens when Whitesboro goes to Pottsboro on Friday night. The other all-local matchup that we have, sort of an interesting one as well, not as interesting, but we have S&S at Collinsville. This is also a 7 o'clock start. There's a couple 7 o'clock starts throughout the list here, and make sure to note that. But this is a 7 o'clock start at Collinsville. S&S is 0-2. They lost last week 48-14 against Tioga. And Collinsville wins a shootout 54-50 against Blue Ridge. Another one of those games that comes down to the wire. It was if you were at halftime of this game, it was 21-6. Collinsville leading, and you probably had no idea that 104 points were on the way to being scored. But Blue Ridge scored, 3 touchdowns in the third quarter and 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and Collinsville was almost matched them. They had 3 touchdowns in the third quarter as well. They only had 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but they got the last one, and that's the one that they were down 50-47. 50-47, and then they scored on a Logan Jenkins pass, 27 yards to Nathan Bocanegra to go ahead, and then they held at the end as Blue Ridge was going to be driving. The interesting note about this game is Blue Ridge did not have a passing yard. They all 479 yards were on the ground. They ran it 53 times. They did throw it 7 times, so it wasn't like I don't know if that was the plan or not. But obviously they found something that worked on the ground. They ripped off some big runs in the third quarter. to really get back in this game. And like I said, it come down to the wire. Collinsville, they had over 400 yards offense. Logan Jenkins with another big game. He had a big game when they put up the 50 points against Tioga in week 1. Sort of the same thing here, 14 carries, 145 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. But passing, 26 of 37, only 205 yards, but he did have 5 touchdown passes, 1 to Carter Scott, 1 to Reed Patterson, 2 to Ryland Newman, and of course the eventual game winner to Bocanegra. Leading the way in receiving was Carter Scott, 6 catches for 66 yards on the TD. Bocanegra had 4 for 52 on the TD. Newman had 10 catches, only 38 yards, but like we said, he caught 2 of those touchdowns, and also added a touchdown on the ground, and he finished with 22 carries for 69 yards in that one. So obviously the story of Collinsville's season so far has been we got an offense and we're going to use it, because they put up 50 points the first game. They put up 54 points this game. I looked it up. The last time that Collinsville scored at least 50 points in 3 straight games was 1993. I'm sorry. So dating back to last year, because in their last game of last season, they scored 50 points, and then the first 2 games this year. They've done it 3 games in a row, and the last time that they did it 3 games in a row was 1993. So we'll see if they can go to make it 4 games in a row, dating back to last year. If you just want to look at a single season, then yes, 1993 was the last time that they did it in one single season. That was the 1993 season. And SNS comes into this matchup off that 48-14 loss to Tioga. It has been the same story for the Rams, both of their games. They've given up 45 and 48 points, and they've scored 21 and 14 points. So a little bit of trying to figure things out on both sides of the ball, of course, under a new head coach and coaching staff and some new starters at some key positions. In that loss, Brett Stewart ran for a 26-yard touchdown run as part of 17 carries for 87 yards. Chase Sloan also had a touchdown run as well. He finished with 8 carries for 28 yards. And Garrett Wise had 2 catches for 92 yards in that game for SNS. Turnovers hurt them. They had 4, 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles, and obviously they've been giving up big yardage totals and big scoring totals. Tioga ran for 300 yards, threw for another 191, and so obviously that's the big issue there with SNS. Now, this is interesting because Collinsville's given up points. They switched defenses, and Coach Patterson said before the season, it's a big risk reward type scheme. The Salina 10-1 special. If it works great. If it doesn't work, you have people that can break free and hit big plays on you. So I'm interested to see what SNS can do in this game. Maybe they can kind of get things going offensively. And obviously the biggest thing is who's going to be the first team to slow this Collinsville offense down. They're 2 for 2 and putting up 50 pointers. They've got a couple more games before they get into district, and that district is sort of topsy-turvy. Because you have teams that are traditionally pretty good, and that you would think are always pretty good. Everybody is sort of off to a bad start in that district, record-wise at least. Collinsville's 2-0, Santo is 2-0, Celeste is 1-1, and then you have 4 teams sitting at 0-2, and 2 of those teams, Lindsay and Munster, you would not usually associate getting off to, especially Munster, getting off to an 0-2 start. Now they did schedule up, above their weight class, but still, that's surprising to see them, sitting there with an 0-2 record. So, right now, Collinsville's rolling, and the question is, are they going to keep it rolling? They won this matchup last year pretty handily. I think I actually did this game last year. It was a 30-6 Collinsville win, because of buys and the way the schedule shook out. And Collinsville has won the last 4 meetings. And this is sort of, I don't know if you consider it a rivalry, depending on, you look at the overall wins in the series, and Collinsville now leads 21-20. These two have played every year since 2008, so this is maybe sort of an under the radar sort of rivalry because they are playing every year, and that's good. And that's good to see. I mean, I love seeing the all local matchups, and it's great for bragging rights and great to see. Compare, well, we beat this team and then we beat this team, or we lost to that team but then beat that team. I always like when we have a couple, especially in non-district, you have teams willing to play each other. So it's great to see Whitesboro, Pottsboro, and it's great to see SNS Collinsville still playing each other, and that's going to be at 7 o'clock on Friday at Collinsville. So note that 7 o'clock start time. The next matchup we'll talk about is Van Alstyne going to Anna, that short little trip over to Anna, and these have been some really good games as well. The former district mates have continued to play in non-district, and you can expect games to come down to the wire. And if it does, well, you've got two teams that played down to the wire in their games last week. Van Alstyne is coming off a 30-26 win over Frisco Lebanon Trail to get to 1-1, and Anna is sitting at 2-0, and that's notable for Van Alstyne because Anna won 39-34 against Aubrey, who is, of course, was a region runner-up last year, is in Van Alstyne's district. So that is if you want to see a measuring stick game, this could be one for Van Alstyne. Just to touch on it, because if you've seen it on social media, a lot of people have shown the way Anna won last week because it was a hook and lateral. They were back, inside their 20-yard line, and there was a perfect, pitch and catch, and then the guy was able to go, 70-something yards on the final play of the game, no time left, and that 6 points, they were down 34-33, and they won 39-34. Van Alstyne's comeback against Lebanon Trail, a little bit more substantial in the fact that they had to score 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. The last, a 2-yard touchdown pass from Weston Johnson to Jackson Allen, and that was the difference in a 30-26 win. And that's a game where Lebanon Trail at halftime is up 26-9. Things are looking good for them, and then nobody does anything in the third quarter, and then fourth quarter, Weston Johnson got a majority of the snaps in this game and was able to lead a comeback. The numbers aren't real pretty, 7 of 20 for 110 yards, but he hits Castor Fonseca twice, 1 for 22 yards, 1 for 42 yards, and then, like we said, ultimately, the last one is Jackson Allen for the 2-yarder to give them the win. Johnston also had a 1-yard touchdown run, and Allen returned a blocked PAT after Lebanon Trail scored late in the second quarter to go up 26-7. Van Alstyne blocked the PAT, and Allen ran it back, and they got 2 points there. And that ended up being a big 2 points because obviously if that doesn't happen, Van Alstyne is only up 28-26, and then Lebanon Trail might have a chance to win the game with a field goal. So crazy comeback victory there, and obviously that was big for Van Alstyne because they lost that game against Pottsboro 39-36, where they tried a furious rally there and they couldn't get there. They ran out of time and came up 3 points short. So good to see them get the win. Obviously, you don't want to start 0-2 and have to face a 2-0 and a team that's coming off a huge victory as well. Just other things to point out in this game: Jaden Mahan. We mentioned I don't know if we mentioned it last week, but it's definitely in the capsules. He only needed 5 yards to go over 2,000 yards in his career. Obviously, that was going to be pretty easy for him to get, and he did. He had 22 carries for 124 yards. Fonseca had the 2 catches for 64 yards and the 2 touchdowns. Allen also had 5 catches for 39 yards. And Van Alstyne was able to pull that out. And like I mentioned, with these two getting together, last year their game was 42-35. They've had, I don't know if I'd have to double check the numbers, but even Anna's won the last 6 meetings, and I swear every single one of them. And this is another, two local teams, two towns next to each other. Even though a lot of this was because they were in the same district. The early part of this, still willing to play each other, and so you have to give them credit for that. They've met every year since 2008, and while Anna has won the last 6, I swear every single one of them comes down to whoever's got the ball last. I feel like 2 years ago there was overtime, or 3. I mean, they've played a lot of evenly matched games, which you want to see when you're finding non-district opponents. You want to find people that are going to challenge you and have just as good a chance as winning as you, because that's how you get better is to be in those sort of situations. So I'm interested to see how this game ends, because it's going to come down to the wire again, like it always does, because that's what Van Alstyne and Anna do. So that's an interesting matchup too. Like I said, you've got two teams coming off crazy comebacks to go into this matchup, and we'll see what happens when Van Alstyne plays at Anna on Friday. Next up on the list, we've got, let's see, how many games do we have left here? We got 6 games left. We got a lot of games this week. I guess we haven't had as many matchups against each other, and of course Gunner's back in the mix now, thankfully. So the next game we're gonna have is Howe hosting Commerce. This is 2-0 Howe against 0-2 Commerce. Commerce lost 32-31 against Leonard. So if you're Howe, that's an interesting score for you, because you're going to play Leonard here in district play in a couple weeks. And Howe is coming off a 49-6 victory against Tom Bean. Now, obviously, these two teams know each other. They were in the same district the last couple of years before Howe dropped down this last time. So last year they played. It was 41-21 Commerce winning that game. But obviously, this is a much different Howe team from the one that we've seen the last couple of years. They're coming off this 49-6 win. They're 2-0. They're trying to start 3-0 for the first time since 2018. But just the fact that they have 2 wins is, if they win, their next win, no matter whether it's this week, next week, whenever, they will have as many wins this season as the previous 3 seasons combined, once they get that third win. So this is not the same team that Commerce is used to playing, and not that Commerce is a great, is some great program or whatever. They have made the playoffs, but they have not had a winning record since 2014. And it's at Howe. You have a Howe team coming off a 49-6 win. They ended the streak in the opener. I think that took a lot of pressure, off of a group that is just trying to get a win in any way possible. They did that, and then they come out last week. They jump up 28-0 in the first quarter, and then they cruise to that win over Tom Bean, who also is coming off a losing streak ending win. And both of those teams went into that game knowing we have a chance to be 2-0, and Howe was able to come right out and kind of set the tone in this one. Austin Haley led the way in a variety of ways. He was 15 of 18 passing for 306 yards. Had a touchdown pass to Ryan Huff, to Braden Ulmer, and Cooper Jones. 2 of those. The one to Jones was for 71 yards. The one for Huff was 54. And Huff led the way, receiving 5 catches for 136 yards in his score, and Cooper Jones was at 4 for 94 for his numbers. And then, not that he had a lot of rushing yards, but Haley did have a touchdown run. And then in the third quarter, he caught a touchdown pass from Cooper Jones. So he had a touchdown run, a touchdown catch, and he had 3 touchdown passes. And as the Howe Enterprise and Monty Walker pointed out, obviously he becomes the first Bulldog to do all that in a game. Throw a touchdown, catch a touchdown, rush for a touchdown, and just adding to the 4-year career there, and he just keeps setting records and doing things that haven't been done. And when all said and done, obviously he's going to own all the career passing records at Howe. By the time his senior season comes to an end, and then you throw in the running game. Antoine Rattler, 12 carries, 86 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. And the defense only forced 2 turnovers, but held Tom Bean to 56 yards rushing on 34 attempts. Tom Bean only passed for 85 yards, so you hold somebody under 150 yards and you only give up the 1 touchdown. And they gave that up in the second quarter when they were already up 35 to nothing. And obviously that's Howe's best performance in a really long time. You've got to go back 3 years, if not beyond that, to find a more dominating performance for them, winning this game 49-6. And like I said, they're in a spot where they can continue to keep this going. As district starts to approach, you stack these wins, get more confidence. And again, I think it's going to be interesting to see with Commerce coming to town. What's the outcome? Is it like it has been? Does Commerce go into this saying, "Oh, it's still Howe. We know how to beat them," and then they show up and go, "Oh, this is not the Howe that we're used to." That's going to be interesting to see for me. Does Howe keep this streak going for yet another week? And they're going to have an interesting matchup next week that we'll talk about, another local matchup. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Howe hosts Commerce. Can they get to 3-0? Can they keep the run going? They're playing really well. They got a lot of confidence, and we'll see what happens when they host Commerce on Friday night. Next up, Tioga hosting Valley View. Both teams come in at 1-1. Both teams got their win last week. Valley View won against Alvord 36. We've got a lot of matchups this week where the local opponent, is going to be interested by the score of the previous game of their opponent, because Valley View won 36-27 against Alvord, who was in Tioga's district, and Tioga is coming off that 48-14 victory against SNS, like we talked about when we were discussing the Rams. Interesting note about Valley View. If they had not won that game, they were going to come into this game on a 13-game losing streak. So now you're playing an opponent that feels pretty good about themselves. They got that monkey off their back. They're feeling really good about what they can do. And Tioga is in sort of the same boat. They thought they were going to go into that matchup against Collinsville, feeling really good. They beat Collinsville last year. Collinsville, had a big second half. And was able to deal with that, and then they come right out this week and win this game pretty handily, 48-14. It's going to be interesting to see, if they have that same balance this week. A lot of Tioga's success so far has been on the ground, and last week was no different. They had 35 carries for 300 yards. Johnny Dorpinghouse again with a big game. Second week in a row, leading the offense, 20 carries, 210 yards, and 3 touchdown runs. He also added a touchdown catch, and he finished with 2 catches for 40 yards in addition to his work on the ground. So he had 250 yards from scrimmage on 22 touches. Jonah Grubbs shipped in 2 touchdown runs, and Austin Norwood on the quarterback keeper. He scored, also threw for 191 yards, 16 of 28 passing. And even though he just had the 1 touchdown to Dorpinghouse, Slade Babbitt, 4 catches for 74 yards. Sam Mott, 2 for 55. So picking up some good chunks there. And that's obviously going to be the thing to watch this week with the Bulldogs. I don't know if this is an opponent they should beat. I don't know if Alvord, it's interesting to see. That was obviously a close game. Is Alvord a little down? They're 0-2 to start, so maybe they're not as, as top of the heap as we thought they might be in that district. And so obviously that's going to be the big question. And of course, and I can say this with a lot of, every time a team has a homecoming game, but this is Tioga's homecoming, so you're dealing with all that stuff going on this week, but you're also coming off a win, and so I think the biggest, if there is a big question, and maybe they sort of answered it this last week, but again, it's a small sample size. If Tioga can pass the ball like they did this last week and at least be able to keep it balanced, that was the issue against Collinsville. Tioga could run the ball, but they had trouble passing, and obviously Norwood stepping in for an injured Hayden Hilliard and it looks like he's going to be the quarterback going forward, that he was obviously more comfortable this week. If he continues to get more comfortable and you can't just focus on the running attack, obviously that makes it more difficult for them to stop. So this is an interesting one to see, if Tyo can keep that going and get things continue to go on the show. Maybe that was you're dealing with all that stuff the first week, but now you kind of get on a little bit of a roll to where you think you should be. And Valley View might be an opponent. Like I said, maybe they're better, maybe they're not. I don't know. Unfortunately, it's too early in the season to kind of size them up. But obviously, they didn't win any games last year. But they've already got to win now, so they're as confident as they're probably going to be. And if that may be an unfortunate thing for Tioga to deal with them this week as they host them on Friday night. We get to talk about the Gunner Tigers for the first time. Gunner is 1-0, and they're coming off a 67-6 victory. That wasn't even that close because that score was 60-0 in the second quarter, and it was 67-0 after 3 quarters. And as we have probably seen with Gunner the last, probably during this whole run, there's a lot of scores that could have been a lot worse, and they were not. And this was one of them. We talked about it. They had their first game canceled. I'm sure they were itching to play anybody. And Trinity Leadership Cedar Hill, we said last week, they played Gainesville and they beat Gainesville, who's a 4A Division I program. They beat them by, I think it was 47-12. So, they're feeling pretty good. You think maybe they have a little bit of an advantage because they've actually played a game, so they've gotten in their routine. And Gunner comes right out and smashes them in the face with 39 points in the first quarter. And then, I'll point out stats in this game, but much like a lot of Gunner games, there's no big, huge stat leader. Their leading rusher is Walker Overman. One of the quarterbacks they played, him and Luke Dodd shared time there. He had 4 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown. Ethan Sloan had 2 touchdown runs, but he only had 29 yards, 6 carries. Ashton Bennett had a touchdown. He only had 4 carries. Nobody on offense had more than the 6 carries by Sloan, and they had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a dozen guys carried the ball. And then, of course, they didn't really throw the ball. Dodd was 5 of 6 for 69 yards. Overman was 3 of 4 for 51 yards. Dodd did have a touchdown pass to Cannon Lemberg. Ivy Hellman actually led them in receiving 2 catches for 40 yards. But it was a total team effort, and you can see, Trinity Leadership had 4 turnovers. 3 of them were interceptions. Gunner only had 289 yards of offense. Trinity Leadership had negative 60 yards rushing. And Jace Martin had a kickoff return, 60 yards for a touchdown. He added also a touchdown run. Gunner blocked a punt that was in the end zone, that ended up in the end zone. Hayden Farrell fell on that for that touchdown. Adam Reed added a touchdown run. Gunner got a safety. So, it was basically, the only thing they didn't get was a defensive score, which is kind of surprising. And then the shutout was broken by an 85-yard pass in the fourth quarter. So they weren't able to get the shutout, but when you're winning 67-0, that's about the only thing you have left. So I didn't know what to expect because, pretty decent team. Beat Gainesville. I didn't think it was. I saw the score in the second quarter, and then people were like, "It's 60-0," and there's like 4 minutes until halftime, and it was like, "Whoa." I think this is going to be a little bit of a better test this week for Gunner. They're hosting Trinity Christian Addison, so they're still training with some Trinity people, but this is Trinity Christian Addison, who is 0-2. They lost last week, 13-10 against All Saints Episcopal. The difference is, while Trinity Leadership Cedar Hill was a TAPS program, Trinity Christian Addison is a TAPS program, and they play at the top level in TAPS Division I. Denison played them 6 or 7 years ago now. This is the really interesting score. I know they're 0-2. All Saints Episcopal is a big private school in terms of enrollment. I am interested to see what this score is going to look like. You don't want to say I expect Gunner to win because Gunner almost never loses. But this is a big timer one. I think this is, and we said this about their whole schedule. They're gonna play Brock here coming up. They're gonna play Gladewater, who's a traditionally good East Texas program. But I think this is after Brock. This is the most interesting matchup because of just the size. I mean, this would be like if Gunner was playing a Denison or a Sherman from a public school standpoint. They're sort of in that level enrollment wise. So I'm fascinated to see what they can do. But outside of that, I mean, this is we did say out of the 4 games, I thought Gunner could potentially go 0-4. They could go 4-0. They could have any record in between. They could have any number of wins, and I don't think it would matter. They could go 0-4 or 1-3, and I would still bet that they would go to the state semifinals or the state championship game because they're that good. And this is a really good, challenging schedule for anybody, let alone for what Gunners has turned into a program. So that's going to be a fun one to look at for sure on Friday, just to kind of see if they can continue to do what they do. But if not, it's like I said, the fact that they're playing this game is just interesting in itself because a lot of people on their level, 3A Division II, maybe even 3A Division I probably would not be playing this game because of the size difference. And so that's just interesting in itself for sure. A couple more games. We'll get to these real quick. The Bells Panthers looking to bounce back after their the 31-27 loss against Whitesboro. Obviously, they thought they had that game at least somewhat in hand. You go into halftime, you're up 21-10, and then you're just the slot T got stopped for the most part. 49 carries for 255 yards. Grady Waldrop had a big game, 24 carries, 104 yards, scored all 4 of the touchdowns. Spencer Hines had 9 carries for 88 yards. Brock Baker 13 for 55. But the second half, they just could not find the end zone until almost the end of the game, and even then, that was almost enough to pull the game out. But Whitesboro was able to drive down and get that game-winning score. So you had a good win over Munster to open the season if you're Bells. I thought you knew this game was going to be close, had a chance to be 2-0, but you're 1-1 and you're hosting Paris Chisholm, who is also 1-1. They're coming off a win 34-28 against Wolf City. This is interesting because when I was doing the research, because they haven't played in 3 years, so I probably may have it's been a while. But Paris runs the slot T and Bells runs the slot T, so this game may be over in like an hour and 5 minutes, depending on how things go. So that's an interesting matchup that you don't always get to see. And then just a note on Paris Chisholm, they haven't had a winning record since 2009. Bells has won 4 of the last 5 meetings. The last time they played was 2019. So it's not a legit sort of sample size because a lot of the kids have changed, obviously. If you want another fun fact, Paris Chisholm has a running back named Espin. So there's that. So his parents must obviously like sports. So it should be maybe no surprise that he's involved in sports. But I feel like this is a good bounce back game. Again, Bells has a pretty had a pretty good non-district schedule. You're playing starting with Munster and Whitesboro. That's playing two heavyweight type programs. And then of course you have what's coming up in your district with Gunner. So I like Bells to bounce back in a big way this week. Maybe not in a big way, but I think they're going to win. And it should be interesting to see if they can just get back on track. And like I said, maybe right now just Whitesboro has their number, and that's, what are you going to do? That doesn't mean anything in the long run, but obviously you challenge yourself against a good program. Going over to Whitewright hosting Honeygrove. Whitewright 2-0. They won last week 28-19 against Celeste, and Honeygrove is coming off their win. They are 1-1, and they won 52-0 against Frost, which I want to know how that game got scheduled, because Honeygrove playing Frost in non-district just seems like Frost is kind of in the middle of nowhere, and the fact that they ended up playing there's got to be some. I wonder if there's a connection with Leonard's former coach Shane Fletcher's over there. I wonder if he maybe has sort of a connection or something to Frost, because that just seems like a really random pairing in non-district play for sure. Especially because Honeygrove played Howe last week. They're playing Whitewright this week, so it just seems weird that you would kind of go out of your way to play Frost. But Whitewright has sort of stuck to their. Hey, these are the people we've played the last couple of years, and we're going to play them again, because they've continued to open with Clarksville. They continue to play Celeste, and they continue to play Honeygrove. This is a rematch from last year. This is the 5th year in a row that these two teams have played. Last year, Honeygrove won 20-7. Obviously, though, they have a new coach, a lot of young players. They lost that game close to Howe, 20-15, so they could easily be sitting here 2-0. If they had a chance at the end to go down and score, and they were stopped. And Whitewright is 2-0. Like I said, I saw their game against Clarksville to open the season, 41-0 shutout. And then this last week, they were able to double up Celeste, a game that's 14-13 at halftime. They scored twice in the fourth quarter to go up 28-13. Celeste does get a touchdown, but that's as close as they got. And so now you have a Howe team that has a chance to be 3-0 for the first time since 2014. Obviously off to the great start. This past week, Jackson Evans has the big game, 14 carries for 115 yards and a touchdown. Maverick Sartain catches another touchdown pass. He has 6 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Ball also hit Zane Prieto, second week in a row that those two connect. And that was actually Prieto's only catch. Goes for a 12-yard touchdown. Ball goes 7 of 13 for 85 yards. And you can, they're not asking him to do too much. Obviously, he's filling in for Alex Reeves, who got hurt in the first scrimmage. And he stepped in, and like I said, he's just, you don't want to label him a game manager because he's, last week or 2 weeks ago, he contributed a lot with his legs. But just the offense is moving. It's getting the job done. They're not turning the ball over, which is obviously a huge thing. You look at this box score and you say Whitewright had 0 turnovers, Celeste had 4. That gets you beat most times. And Celeste they did a lot of damage through the air. They had 382 yards passing. They could not stop Quentin Campbell, who had 5 catches for 240 yards and all 3 of the touchdowns from Michael Connolly. But Celeste really couldn't move the ball on the ground. And outside of Campbell on those touchdowns, they really didn't do a whole lot of anything else. And obviously the turnovers were a big factor, 3 interceptions and a fumble. I know Chalk Bailey had a big game, lead the way defensively on the defensive line to get a lot of that done. And so I think this is another winnable game for a local team. You've got a chance to go 3-0. Just keep building, stacking those wins, and building on the success, getting into, after dropping down, you were already feeling good, and now you're getting the job done on the field as well. Because like we said, that was a game last year, Whitewright lost to Celeste in overtime. So they've already flipped one win, and this is a chance to flip another one after losing by 2 touchdowns to Honeygrove last year. So that's going to be an interesting matchup there as Whitewright hosts Honeygrove on Friday night. And the last game is Tom Bean hosting Chico. This is 1-1 Tom Bean against 0-2 Chico. This is another game where the opponent is an interesting matchup because Chico lost last week 24-19 against Trenton. Obviously, Trenton is in Tom Bean's district, so if you'd like to see where you measure up sort of compared to Trenton, that's obviously an opportunity for you to do that this week. We did mention before because Howe beat Tom Bean last week 49-6. You had the Tomcats coming off that win against Cumbie, come from behind win. Lots of defensive plays need to be made. You go down and score. Gavin Hamilton has the big game. You break. You had a season where you didn't win a game. You win your first game under a new head coach. Things are going good. And then Howe kind of snaps you back to reality maybe a little bit. That game was over pretty quick in the first half. They jumped up 35-0. Hamilton did score the touchdown. He had 20 carries for 45 yards. But like we mentioned, a lot of struggles beyond that, moving the ball. And so, again, this is sort of an interesting setup. You have a Chico team. They're 0-2. They lost by 5 points to Trenton. They lost their opener by a point. So it's going to be interesting to see, are you just playing competitively and just coming up short? What does that say about your opponents? I don't know. These teams have not played since 2019, so again, you can't really compare it, although that was a Tom Bean wins for whatever that means. So I am interested to see the result of this game as well. I think obviously it's a better setup for Tom Bean than having to play Howe. And again, if you bounce back and you get the win, you're sort of, I don't know if you say you're ahead of schedule, if you're or where you're at if you're Tom Bean, because anything now is a bonus because you've already won more games than you did last year, and you're still trying to build the confidence of these kids. I'm sure that took a hit last week, but like I said, with a chance to bounce back this week and face Chico and get a win. Okay, now you've got a couple more games before you get into district. And kind of see where you stack up before you really get in the fire for the games that count. So that's going to be, like I said, that'll be an interesting matchup just because I think, again, this is another game that is winnable for our local people. The first 2 weeks of the season, I think there's only been one game per week that a local team has lost to a non-local opponent. So like last week, Bells lost to Whitesboro, but so somebody local was going to lose because they're playing each other. SNS lost to Tioga because they're playing each other. But when you look at the scores the first 2 weeks, people playing outside Texoma teams, the record's been really good both weeks. And I think, looking at the schedule this week, there's a decent chance that we have a lot of those teams. If they don't outright win, they're going to be competitive, and so I don't want to say it's really interesting to see that because a lot of people are doing well right off the bat. It makes it hard to try to find who to go cover because everybody's winning, and you want to try to get to everybody, and you can't because we just don't have the space and we don't have the manpower. But it is not going unnoticed that there's 8 games in a week and 7 local teams are winning out of those 8 games, and that's happened 2 weeks in a row. So let's hope that continues this week. Like I said, I really think you can say it every week, except for maybe the bye week, and even then there's probably some good matchups where a lot of teams take the bye the same week. There's always so many interesting matchups. There's always so many interesting things, and we're already in week 3. It's weird to say it, but the season just always seems to fly by. 20% of the season is done. It's just that's crazy. And so there's a lot of good matchups. So I hope you enjoyed listening to the podcast. As always, every Wednesday, HeraldDemocrat.com, on our social media, on my Twitter, @Jason De La Rosa. We put that out. We put out the capsules, the preview capsules, on Wednesday as well. And then, of course, if you're looking for the scores, follow me on Twitter. We post them with all the standings updated on Friday nights. It may be late, but it's up there. And then you'll either find games either up late Friday night or posted throughout the day on Saturday, always at HeraldDemocrat.com. So if you don't want to wait till the next week's paper, you can read them online as well. So, again, thanks for tuning into the podcast. Enjoy the games this week, and we will see you next time.